The fluorescent lights of Westridge County Courthouse buzzed overhead as Tanya Brooks straightened her charcoal gray suit jacket. At 34, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought for everything she'd achieved. Her dark brown eyes scanned the crowded hallway, watching as attorneys, clients, and court officers hurried past. "Excuse me," Tanya said, approaching the front desk. "I'm here for the Washington case." The clerk barely glanced up. "Take a seat. They're running behind." Tanya nodded and found an empty bench. She opened her leather portfolio, reviewing her notes one last time. After graduating top of her class from Howard Law and spending 8 years building a reputation at the Justice Department, Tanya had returned to her hometown to tackle systemic issues in the local justice system. The Washington case was her first major filing, a civil rights violation that had gone uninvestigated for months. What started as a routine traffic stop had escalated into something much darker. Her client, Marcus Washington, sat beside her now, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "You ready for this?" Tanya asked softly. Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the courtroom doors. "As ready as I'll ever be. Just glad you're here. Nobody else would take the case." "Well, today that changes," Tanya replied, gathering her files as their case number was called. "Today, we make them listen." Inside the courtroom, Officer Derek Reeves leaned against the prosecution table with a smirk etched across his face. His blue uniform was pressed to perfection, badge gleaming under the lights. When Tanya and Marcus entered, his eyes narrowed, tracking them as they made their way to their seats. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Pamela Harmon," announced the bailiff. Once everyone was seated, Officer Reeves was called to testify about the traffic stop. He sauntered to the witness stand, taking his oath with practiced ease. "Officer Reeves, please describe the events of April 15th, prompted the district attorney. "Routine traffic stop. Taillight was out. Subject became belligerent when asked for license and registration," Reeves stated flatly. Tanya rose to cross-examine. "Officer Reeves, the dash cam footage shows my client calmly handed over his documents. Where exactly was the belligerence?" Reeves chuckled, glancing toward the judge's bench for support. "Look, these things don't always show up on camera. I felt threatened. By a man sitting in his car with both hands visible on the steering wheel?" Tanya pressed. "Listen, sweetheart," Reeves said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I've been on the force for 15 years. You don't know what it's like out there." A few officers in the gallery snickered. Judge Harmon tapped her gavel lightly but didn't admonish him for the inappropriate address. "That's Ms. Brooks to you, officer," Tanya replied evenly, though her jaw tightened. "And I'd appreciate if you'd answer the question I asked, not the one you wish I had." Reeves rolled his eyes. "Whatever you say. These community activists always think they know better than law enforcement." Judge Harmon's patience visibly thinned. "Officer Reeves, that's enough. You will address counsel with respect in my courtroom." Tanya calmly retrieved a document from her portfolio. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter this into evidence." As the bailiff delivered the paper to the judge, District Attorney Wilson stood. "Your Honor, we haven't been provided with this document." "That's because it wasn't relevant until Officer Reeves questioned my credentials," Tanya replied. "It's my CV and appointment letter." Judge Harmon reviewed the document, her eyebrows rising slightly. She handed it to the district attorney, whose face drained of color. "For the record," Judge Harmon announced, "Ms. Brooks is not merely a community activist, as Officer Reeves suggested. She's a former senior trial attorney with the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, appointed last month to lead the federal task force investigating police misconduct in this district." A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Officer Reeves shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "Ms. Brooks graduated first in her class from Howard Law School and clerked for Justice Martinez on the Supreme Court." Tanya kept her expression neutral, though satisfaction flickered in her eyes. "Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Officer Reeves, let's return to the question of why your report contradicts the video evidence." The officer's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by a tense, rigid stare. The courtroom adjourned for a brief recess. Tanya stood in the hallway with Marcus, discussing next steps, when District Attorney Wilson approached. "Ms. Brooks, can we talk privately?" he asked, voice lowered. They moved to a conference room where Wilson closed the door firmly. "I didn't know about your appointment to the task force." "That was intentional," Tanya replied, spreading files across the table. "Our preliminary investigation has uncovered some disturbing patterns." She opened a thick folder labeled Westridge PD, Traffic Stops 2020 to 2023. Charts and graphs spilled out, displaying statistical analyses highlighted in red and yellow. Black drivers in this county are 6 times more likely to be searched during traffic stops, despite finding contraband at lower rates than in vehicles driven by white citizens, Tanya explained, pointing to the numbers. "And Officer Reeves? His personal statistics are even worse." Wilson's face paled further. "I wasn't aware, that's the problem," Tanya cut in. "Nobody was aware because nobody looked. We've interviewed 27 individuals with similar experiences to my clients. We've cross-referenced every officer's body camera footage against their written reports. The discrepancies are significant." She pulled out a USB drive. "This contains footage from Officer Reeves's last 50 traffic stops. In 14 instances, his camera mysteriously turned off just before the alleged belligerence began. In 22 others, his report claims resistance that simply isn't visible in the footage." Wilson wiped his brow. "What are you proposing?" "Justice, Mr. Wilson. Nothing more, nothing less. Marcus Washington's case is just the beginning." Court resumed with tension thick in the air. Officer Reeves had been joined at the table by Captain Bennett, head of the precinct, who whispered urgently to the district attorney. Tanya noticed their worried glances and kept her focus steady. "Your Honor," Tanya began as she approached the bench. "I'd like to present Exhibit C, a compilation of traffic stop data from the Westridge Police Department spanning the last 3 years." The bailiff distributed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. Captain Bennett flipped through the pages rapidly, his complexion darkening. "Ms. Brooks, what is the relevance of this statistical data to Mr. Washington's specific case?" Judge Harmon asked. "Your Honor, this establishes a pattern of practice that directly relates to Officer Reeves's credibility and my client's claims of discriminatory treatment," Tanya replied. "If I may direct the court's attention to page 16. The large screen in the courtroom displayed a chart showing Officer Reeves's arrest statistics compared to departmental averages. Officer Reeves has conducted 342 traffic stops of black drivers in the past year alone, representing 76% of his total stops in a county where black residents make up just 18% of the population, Tanya stated clearly. Of those stops, 89% resulted in searches, compared to only 12% of his stops involving white drivers. Reeves shifted in his seat, his knuckles widening as he gripped the edge of the table. "Furthermore," Tanya continued, clicking to the next slide, "I'd like to present video evidence from Mr. Washington's traffic stop alongside Officer Reeves's written report." The side-by-side comparison was damning. The report claimed Marcus had been argumentative and reached toward his waistband, while the video clearly showed him sitting calmly with hands visible. "Your Honor," the district attorney interjected, standing abruptly. "This goes beyond the scope of today's hearing." "On the contrary," Tanya countered. "This hearing is precisely about whether Mr. Washington's civil rights were violated. The evidence shows not only that they were, but that such violations appear to be standard practice for Officer Reeves." Judge Harmon leaned forward. "Captain Bennett, were you aware of these discrepancies?" The captain cleared his throat. "Your Honor, statistics can be interpreted in many ways, that wasn't my question," Judge Harmon interrupted sharply. Were you aware that your officer's reports contradicted video evidence? Silence hung over the courtroom as Captain Bennett struggled to formulate a response. Finally, he answered, "No, Your Honor. I was not personally aware." "Then perhaps you should be," Judge Harmon stated firmly. "This court takes these allegations extremely seriously." Officer Reeves leaned over to whisper something to the district attorney, who shook his head sharply in response. Tanya continued, "Your Honor, in light of this evidence, we request immediate dismissal of all charges against Mr. Washington, a formal apology from the department, and the implementation of body camera review protocols to prevent such discrepancies in the future." Judge Harmon nodded. "Mr. Wilson, does the prosecution have a response?" The district attorney stood slowly. "Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Washington." "So ordered," Judge Harmon declared, bringing down her gavel. "Additionally, I am referring Officer Reeves to the Police Standards Board for investigation and potential disciplinary action. Captain Bennett, I expect a full internal review of your department's practices to be conducted within 30 days. Officer Reeves jumped to his feet. "This is ridiculous. You can't just sit down, officer," the judge commanded sharply. "One more word and I'll hold you in contempt." Marcus gripped Tanya's hand tightly, tears welling in his eyes as the reality sank in. Justice had been served, not just for him, but potentially for countless others. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered as Tanya addressed the press. "Today marks the beginning, not the end. The task force will continue its work until every citizen can expect equal treatment under the law, regardless of their race." 1 week later, the mayor announced a comprehensive overhaul of police procedures, including mandatory bias training and independent review of all use of force incidents. Officer Reeves was placed on unpaid leave pending further investigation. As for Tanya, she received dozens of calls from others in the community seeking help. Her office became a beacon of hope, a place where voices that had long been silenced found someone who would finally listen. Sometimes justice requires the right person in the right place at the right time, Tanya told Marcus over coffee. "But it always requires courage, yours as much as mine." Marcus smiled, the weight of months of anxiety finally lifting from his shoulders. "Not just justice," he replied. "Change."